Hey guys, what's up? Chef Hamel here, and today I'm going to show you how to make absolutely delicious cauliflower gnocchi. Gnocchi are little dumplings that are traditionally made out of potato. They are an Italian dish, often kind of grouped in the fresh pasta category, but they're a little bit more like a dumpling than a pasta per se, but they're traditionally made from potato, and today we are going to be using potatoes and cauliflower with the addition of some flour, some salt, and some egg yolk to help bind it all together. So the first thing we need is 8 ounces of cauliflower. The recipe says half of a small head, but I like to be a little bit more accurate than that. So I'm actually going to be using my digital scale today to measure my 8 ounces of cauliflower and my 8 ounces of potato. I purchased this digital scale on Amazon. It was super affordable. I've had it now for a few years, and weighing your measurements out versus say using a measuring cup or kind of like guesstimating is a lot more accurate. So I would highly suggest that you pick one of these up in your kitchen if you do not already have one. So I'm gonna open my cauliflower up, and this is kind of a bigger cauliflower. So I'm just gonna cut off some florets until I get to 8 ounces. Then what we are going to do is we are going to be roasting our cauliflower and our potatoes in a 450-degree oven for 1 hour until they are tender. And once they are done cooking, I am going to put them through a ricer, which I will show you what that is. Or you could use a food mill if you had one at home. I realize those are two tools that not everybody has in their kitchen. There we go, 8 ounces. So if you didn't have either of those tools, you could use a food processor just to get the cauliflower nice and fine. So we have our 8 ounces of cauliflower, and I actually pre-measured these 2 potatoes because they're on the smaller side and they happen to be just over 8 ounces, which will be fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some tin foil, and I'm going to wrap up my cauliflower and wrap up my potatoes. And like I said, they're going to go in a 450-degree oven for 1 hour to roast and get nice and tender. So I have my cauliflower. I'm going to put this on a baking sheet. And I have my 2 potatoes. So I'm going to put this in my oven, and we'll meet you back here as soon as this is done cooking. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back. So my cauliflower and my potatoes are done cooking. They were in the oven for about an hour on 450 degrees, and both are nice and tender, which is what we're looking for. So the first thing that we need to do is to rice both the cauliflower and the potato. I am using a ricer. A ricer is a tool that has a bunch of holes in the bottom. You could also use what's called a food mill if you had that, or if you didn't have either of those, you could use a food processor. But I really like this ricer just because it makes everything really nice and fine. So this is really great for mashed potatoes. You can use this to break up whole tomatoes. You can use this for cauliflower. You could use it for a bunch of different stuff. So that's what I'm going to be using today. So the first thing that I need to do is put some of my cauliflower in my ricer. Just using tongs because it is very, very hot. And I'm actually going to be making gnocchi right on my counter here, so I am just going to be pushing this right through on my counter. Now cauliflower has a lot of water in it, so it may be a little bit on the juicy side, which is okay. I might actually choose to put some of this in a paper towel, actually. I gotta see how much moisture is in this. have a lot of moisture in this. The key to making gnocchi is really the texture, and it's hard sometimes the first few times you make it to get it exactly right, because if there's too much moisture in it, your little dumplings are going to fall apart. So it's kind of like a little bit of a learning curve with making gnocchi, but that's okay. That's with making anything. So I'm going to push this through. And then we need to do our potatoes. So I'm actually going to get a paper towel. And I am going to squeeze out some of this excess liquid that is in this cauliflower, just because it kind of has a lot of water in it. And I don't want our gnocchi to be too wet, so I'm just gonna kind of scoop this up and squeeze some of this excess water out, because we don't want that in our gnocchi. And the drier it is, the better result we're gonna have. Boop. All right, that should be fine. I got a decent amount of water out of that, which you wanna do. Again, not necessary, but it kind of depends on how much liquid your cauliflower has. I feel like the last time I made this recipe, I didn't squeeze out the water and it came out fine, but I also felt like my cauliflower didn't really have that much liquid in it for whatever reason. So you just kind of have to use your judgment, like with a lot of cooking. All right, so I have my cauliflower. Make sure I get it all off the paper towel. There we go. Now I am going to cut my potatoes in half. Now be careful because they are very hot. And you need to scoop out the flesh. And again, we're going to put it right into our ricer. So just be careful that you don't burn yourself. And this is just going to make sure that the texture of our gnocchi is really nice and smooth. And you're not going to really feel any chunks in it. It's going to be a really nice potato and cauliflower flavor. This recipe is a New York Times recipe, so you can look it up online. And it says it makes about 4 portions. But I feel like, I don't know, I can kind of almost eat a full recipe by myself. So I would probably double the recipe if you were making this for a crowd, just because it's so good. And I mean, an actual portion size for gnocchi probably isn't actually that many. But I tell myself there's cauliflower in it, so it's not bad, right? So I'm gonna squeeze my potato through my ricer. And let me do the rest. You can purchase a ricer at Bed Bath & Beyond. I'm sure you can get one at Target, Amazon. They are very inexpensive, and they're better than a food mill only because they are smaller, so they're easier to store. So if you don't have a lot of storage or you don't want like a ton of kitchen gadgets in your house, a ricer is definitely the way to go, just because it is handheld and it is a lot easier to store. Alrighty. As much of this potato flesh as I can. I think I got it all. Move that aside. And make sure I get everything in my ricer. Alrighty. So after I rice all of this onto the counter, that is when I'm going to start adding the flour, the salt, and the egg yolk to the recipe. Alrighty. So it should be all of our potato. If there's any little bits in there, you can kind of scoop it out. Don't want to waste anything. Alrighty. So that should be good. So I'm going to kind of spread this out a little on my counter. And the recipe calls for 3/4 cup of all-purpose flour. I wanted to kind of try a gluten-free flour, but there wasn't any comments of people who have tried it, and I didn't want to go through all this effort of making it for it not to work out. So I'm actually going to be using 1/2 cup of all-purpose flour, and then I'm substituting the extra 1/4 cup of flour with garbanzo bean flour, which is made from chickpeas. So I'm going to kind of see how this turns out. And maybe next time I make this, slowly add more gluten-free flour and less of the all-purpose flour. There we go. Sprinkle this right on top. My salt. And then the recipe calls for 1 large egg yolk. I actually have these egg yolks from when I made buttercream the other day, Italian buttercream. So I'm actually gonna kind of eyeball this out because this is like multiple egg yolks. I'll start with that, and if I need more, I can always scoop more out. So so I'm gonna use a bench scraper to kind of start mixing all my ingredients together. And as the dough kind of starts to come together, then we can go in with our hands. But at this point, what you're trying to do is you want the potato and the cauliflower and the egg yolk to kind of absorb some of that flour, so it's going to turn into more of a dough-like consistency. Let me see at this point. If I think it needs more liquid, I can add a little bit more egg yolk. If I think it needs a little more flour, I can always add a little bit more flour. Gnocchi should be nice and tender, so you don't really want to knead it that much. You kind of just want to form a dough until it just comes together. It's feeling pretty good. I don't really know if I need to add more flour to this. Let me see. Yeah, this feels pretty good. And we're gonna put more flour down on our table anyway when we start to shape this. So I'm not too concerned. I don't want to add too much flour because then it's not going to be the right consistency. So, yeah, this feels really good. Oh, my sleeve. Alrighty. Let's see if I can get all this dough together. And I am going to give my hands a nice wash. And then we are going to shape this beautiful gnocchi. Guys, welcome back. So now it is time to shape our gnocchi. So the first thing I'm going to do is put a healthy amount of flour down on my surface here, only because this dough is a little bit sticky, so you don't want it to stick to the counter. And I'm going to take my bench scraper and I'm going to cut my dough ball into 4 equal portions. And I'm going to take 1 portion at a time. And I'm going to start kind of shaping it in my hands before I get it down on the counter. And you're going to be using your hands and gently pushing and moving outward so that you get a nice even rope, I guess we'll say, all the way across our dough. You want it to be the even thickness so that all of your gnocchi ends up to be the same size. And just be very careful. If it's very sticky, you can always add more flour, but don't add too much flour because you don't want it to get too dry. I'm actually gonna move some of that out of the way. And just very carefully keep rolling it out until it is all about the same width. And you can kind of go as thin as you'd like, but it all kind of depends on what size gnocchi that you want. Now, gnocchi is typically, well, I shouldn't say typically, sometimes it is rolled on a gnocchi board like this that has the little ridges in it so that you can create those indentations, or sometimes people roll it on a fork. These I'm just going to kind of keep smooth on the outside. The dough is very delicate to begin with, and I really don't need to make it all pretty with little lines on it. So I'm gonna kind of go as is. So this looks pretty good. I am going to take my bench scraper and I am going to cut my little gnocchi. Make sure they're all about the same size so that they all cook evenly. And they should be nice little pillows. If your dough is sticking to your bench scraper at all, you can put a little bit of flour on it just to prevent that from sticking. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of flour on a parchment lined sheet pan or cookie sheet. And I'm going to place them on there until I get all of the rest of the dough rolled out and cut. And then I'll show you how to cook them. Hey guys, welcome back. So I have finished shaping all of the gnocchi and I actually had a bunch of other food prep to do. So I put these in my fridge for a little bit while I was working on the rest of my food, and it also kind of helped set them up a little bit. You don't have to put them in your fridge, but that is what I just chose to do. So I am just waiting for my water to boil, and then I also have a saute pan here that I am going to put on a medium-low heat with some avocado oil because I am going to boil these first for a few minutes, really just until they float to the top, and then I'm going to take them off and I'm going to lightly saute them in this pan just to get a little bit of a crispness and texture on them. This step is completely optional. You can just boil them and then add them to your favorite pasta sauce. But I like my gnocchi with a little bit of a crispy crust on them, so I am going to saute them in here because I want to. So I have my water here. Make sure that you salt your water. Always salt your pasta water or dumpling water anytime you're really boiling anything because it's going to impart some extra flavor into the dumplings or into the pasta. So this is almost at a boil, and you don't want this at a complete rolling boil. So I am going to start adding these in kind of one by one, only because I don't want them to stick together. And once they rise to the top is when we know that they are done. And you can either just scoop them out and toss them with your favorite sauce, or you can saute them like I am going to do. So I am just going to carefully add these in. They are sticky, so you really have to make sure they don't stick together on the sheet pan and they don't stick together in the pot. I am going to add a little bit of avocado oil in a second to my pan. And what I like to use is a skimmer or some sort of spider or any sort of slotted spoon to scoop these out when they're done, and I'm going to just add them straight to my pan. So it should only take about a minute or so, maybe 2 minutes. But it's really important that you don't leave them in the water too long, and it's really important that the water does not come to a rolling boil because they actually will kind of disintegrate and start to break up, and we don't want that. So, looks like they're getting close to floating. I'm going to add a little bit of my oil in here, just a little bit. These are going to be so delicious. They'd be great with any sort of tomato sauce or even a bolognese, like a meat sauce, a butter sauce, or a brown butter sauce with sage would be delicious. I'm going to be making kind of like a lemon cream sauce. I actually splurged today and I bought some lobster, so I'm going to be putting some lobster and some asparagus in my sauce as well. Just because I haven't had lobster in so long and I just was really feeling it today. So I'm going to start scooping some of these off the top that are already floating. Make sure I get off as much water as I can since we're putting it into a pan with some oil. And you really just want a really nice brown crust on the gnocchi. So, okay, now I'll put my next batch in the water. These are also great to freeze, so if you make the gnocchi, you can actually leave them on a sheet pan like this, and if you have room to put the whole sheet pan in your freezer, you can put them, put it in your freezer, and then after they freeze, take the sheet pan out and very quickly take the gnocchi and put them in a freezer bag, and then you will have gnocchi that you can just take out and use whenever you would like. Just kind of like the Trader Joe's kind, right? I've never actually had the Trader Joe's cauliflower gnocchi. It's like all over all the food blogs and stuff online. I actually don't really have a Trader Joe's that's that close to me. It's like 30 minutes away. So anything that I can make myself, I try to. And of course, you can kind of control what you put into food when you make it yourself. I'm going to crank the heat a little bit on this. And if these are done before these are done crisping in the pan, I can just put them on my saute pan, or excuse me, on my, oh my god, I can't speak, on my cookie sheet, on my sheet pan. There we go, for now. So I am just checking on these. They're not really that golden brown yet. Some of them kind of are getting there, but I don't want them to get too dark, so I'm just starting to flip some of them. And then I can kind of toss them around a little bit more once both sides have a little bit of crust on them. The New York Times also has some really great recipes for carrot gnocchi, spinach gnocchi, beet gnocchi, ricotta gnocchi. So if you are interested in making any of those or do make them, please let me know how they turn out, because this is the only the recipe from there that I've made so far with the cauliflower. But I really want to try the carrot and the beet. I have some beets in my fridge that I've been looking for a recipe to kind of utilize them, and I think beet gnocchi would be really cool with some goat cheese. Alright, I think that's on my gnocchi. Let me just double check. One more. Turn my water off. Now, like I've said in previous videos, when I make pasta, I always like to reserve some pasta water no matter what kind of sauce I'm making, because that starchy water is really great in thickening your sauce. So even though I turn this off, I'm going to make sure that before I dump it, I'm going to save a little bit to put in my sauce. So I'm just waiting for these to kind of crisp up a little bit, and then I will put them in a bowl, and then I am going to crisp up the second half of my gnocchi, which I already boiled, and then I will show you the final product. Hey guys, welcome back. So this is the finished product. So mine is already tossed with the sauce I made. I kind of made like a creamy sauce. With some asparagus, shallots, garlic, tomato, lobster that I poached separately and then added to the sauce, some lemon zest, lemon juice, a little bit of white wine, a little bit of butter, and some Greek yogurt to add creaminess, just because I don't have any heavy cream on hand. And I wanted something a little bit healthier anyway. And it came out really good, and I kind of just completely went off the cuff and made up the sauce as I was going. And it came out really good. So I'm gonna plate it up for you guys just to show you. The great thing about the cauliflower gnocchi is that even though you can taste the cauliflower, it still has a really mild flavor, and so it really lends itself well to any kind of sauce that you put with it. So you can really do a bunch of things. But I was feeling a little crazy today, and like I said earlier, like I was really wanting some lobster, so I'm excited. Get some more of that lobster in there. And then I have some fresh chives from my garden for a garnish, and a little extra green, and then some fresh grated Parmigiano Reggiano for a little saltiness, and you know, you gotta have a little bit of cheese. And it looks absolutely gorgeous. So beautiful. So I just crisped up the gnocchi just a little bit, just to give it a little bit of added texture. And the creamy sauce is going to be so delicious with that fresh pop of lemon juice for citrus and acid, and that spring asparagus will be extra delicious. I am super excited to eat this. I am going to post the recipe in the description, as well as some other gnocchi recipes and some different sauce recipes. If you have any questions whatsoever, please comment down below. And thank you so much for all of your support. This has been such an amazing journey, and I'm really interested to see where this takes me. So thank you so much for watching, and please continue sharing my videos.